But our next segment of the show is crowd size complaints. Now, this is probably a topic that a lot of people probably don't expect, right? Like crowd size. Because at all of the big schools, we're talking Alabama, we're talking Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, all the big schools. I could go on and on. If I didn't list your school, you're probably furious. But all the big schools, you don't have a crowd problem. They show up every game. Nebraska, right? And even no matter how bad Nebraska is, they always show up. That's why some people say they're the best fans in college football. They'll show up for anything. Well, Indiana, that's been a big issue that Curt Cignetti is trying to get fixed. He's trying to build this program, which is why I'm trying to take him at face value and believe he's in here for the long haul. I hope that he is for the rest of his career. But he's trying to build up the fans for Indiana. Indiana, the fans are not there. And we know why, because Indiana is not a football school. We know they're a basketball school, but you got to support this team. You have to support this team if you are an Indiana fan. Look at this crowd on screen. I don't know, it's probably a little hard to see, but you can see a lot of empty seats. This was during the Charlotte game. Indiana is coming off that big win over UCLA. And I think this was taken after halftime, so there were more fans in the first half. There were more fans. But this is a problem for Indiana. You are playing some of your best football outside of maybe 2019, 2020 in the last 30 years, and this is the best you can do. I know it's early, but I think that there's enough evidence that Indiana is a much better team. That the fans need to support this. This is insane. I mean, there were more fans at the UCLA game, it seemed, right, in the Rose Bowl, which I know that's a unique situation. There were actually some people that flew from the Midwest all the way to LA to watch the game, which is understandable. You know, like, that's a big deal, getting to actually experience Los Angeles. Like, maybe it's one of your only opportunities to do so. And Indiana hasn't been there since 1968. So I get that, but there were so many Indiana fans at that game. And at their own stadium, they're just struggling to get people in. And this is why nobody's taking them seriously. I've literally seen so many people online. And yes, social media is not real life. I understand that. Absolutely. 110% social media is not everything. It's not real life. But people online are saying that Indiana, no matter how good they are, this is why they're not legit. This is why they're not a legit team, because their crowd size is not there. And I don't even know what to say. I really don't, because there's so many Indiana basketball fans. And I know that, like, the basketball stadium only holds like 17,000 people. Basketball is a little bit different. But there are so many Indiana fans in Indianapolis. There's so many Indiana fans that are alum in Chicago. They can come down and watch a game. They can support this team. And if the Maryland game coming up, and obviously when we get to the preview of Maryland, it's all caveating on whether that hurricane down, which hopefully prayers for everybody that's going to be in the path of that hurricane. Hopefully, I think Hurricane Helene, hopefully it's not going to be bad as it's looking on the radar, but there's looking like it's going to end up going up, and it might impact the weather of this game against Maryland. So if the weather's not bad, Indiana fans need to show up to this game. If the weather's bad, I understand. But if the weather is pretty solid, like it's, even if it's just cloudy, then Indiana fans need to show up to this game. It needs to be close to a sellout, as close to a sellout as you can possibly get. Because one of the last times Indiana actually sold out a game was that Cincinnati game in the 2021 season, when Indiana was coming off the great year in 2020. And then the fans came back and they lost to Iowa, but there was still some hype for Indiana in that Cincinnati game. And at Cincinnati, that's when they had Desmond Ridder. They were ranked, so it was a big deal. And Indiana fans showed up for that game. And the crowd was really loud. Like, Indiana, even though it's a small stadium, only holds 52,000 people. When it's full, it can actually still be a pretty solid environment. It can be good. The people can be loud like any other environment. Like, Rice-Eccles isn't that big in Utah, but they can still put out a lot of crowd noise. It's not always about crowd size. It's just how loud the crowd is, and if the noise, goes out there on the field, affects the players. So Indiana needs more fans, because I do agree. Like, if you can't get fans, if you can't bring out the people, then it does look pathetic. It looks absolutely pathetic. I mean, you take a team like Maryland, who Indiana is going to be playing. Maryland, most of the time, like, unless Ohio State's going to Maryland and Maryland has like a decent enough team, Maryland never sells out. Maryland never hardly has any fans there. That's why it's a lot of times easy to beat them on their own field. Michigan State beat them on their own field the couple weeks ago. So that's the big problem for teams like this, when you don't have a loyal fan base and your team is not consistently good, the fans are not there. But Indiana really has no excuse here. With the way they've played to start the year, yeah, the opponents haven't been there. But that's why I'm really looking at this Maryland game, especially if the weather's not bad. If in the Maryland game, the crowd is close to full capacity, if it can get to a sellout. They actually, according to online, which I don't know how much you could trust, like ticket services, they claim that the tickets are getting low. So that might be a very good sign for Indiana's crowd in this game. But they need to get consistent crowds at games. If Curt Cignetti and the players are delivering the product, if they're doing a good job, then you need to have fans consistently show up. That's just my opinion for Indiana. But some of the comments, so Keep Chop says Indiana's going 6-0 going into the bye week. If they are 6-0, that's going to make that Nebraska game huge. You didn't keep up your end of the deal, Nebraska. Nebraska lost the game. It'd have been great if Indiana and Nebraska were undefeated. Absolutely. But Nebraska couldn't keep up their end of the deal. Hopefully Indiana can. Aaron Taylor says this Indiana team is going to beat somebody. You can just feel it. Yeah, they might surprise somebody. They really could. Jim says, yeah, Penn State doesn't have that issue. A lot of teams don't. Right? I mean, you're talking about some programs that have had some rough years. Like Nebraska's always the one that I go to. Vandy Dandy, appreciate you for stopping by. He says it right here. There's nothing to do in Nebraska other than go to a football game. Well, I mean, yeah, you do have Notre Dame. I get you have Notre Dame. And that's been the biggest problem for Indiana, really, has been Notre Dame. That Indiana fans support basketball, but then they support Notre Dame in football. There's so many crossover fans. Well, why can't you support Notre Dame and Indiana? Support them both. Like, that's okay. I like multiple teams. I like Alabama in football. I like Indiana. I like Carolina pretty well. Like, why can't you do that? Why can't you support both? That's what they need to do. You know, watch Indiana if they're good. I mean, if they're bad, I understand. Like, you don't want to watch a bad team, especially when you're not that loyal. But, I mean, yeah, like, yikes. I mean, it's insane. And I will say, this picture was taken in the second half. There were more fans in the first half. There were. But that's been another problem for Indiana. Like, they can get fans to come at the beginning of the game. Because I think out of the 52,000 seat, facility that this is, Memorial Stadium, I think they had about 43,000 for this game. So, I mean, it was about like 80% capacity. But by the second half, they had less than 20,000. So, I mean, that's garbage. You got to keep fans the entire game. And I know Indiana was beaten, they were beating Charlotte by a lot. They were destroying them. But still, like, that should make you happy and want to stay. Like, your team's doing good. So, I don't know. Aaron Taylor said, what else do they have to do on a Saturday in Indiana? Get out to the game. Absolutely. Like, it's not like Indiana is that much different than Nebraska. I mean, they are a little bit. You got the Colts. Like, I know they got professional teams, and a lot of them do support the Colts. They'll go to Colts games, just forget about Indiana. But it's still pathetic to me. It really is. That Indiana cannot get more fans than this to stay at least the whole game, but through, even in the first half. And Andy Danny says Indiana isn't legit because the crowd size, the talent on their team. Vanderbilt would handily beat Indiana this year. Okay, Vandy Dandy. I mean, that'd be cool. I'd love to see Indiana play Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt, I will say, Vanderbilt's not bad. They're not bad, but I would favor Indiana, though. But, hey, you never know. That would be interesting. I know they hung with Missouri, but Missouri might not be legit. So, Wolverine Gage says, I'm impressed with Indiana. They're definitely a team that could be a trap game for Michigan. Yeah, it could be. I think Indiana could be a trap game for Michigan. Ohio State will be tougher because it's on the road, but I was a little more confident. I'm not going to lie. I was more confident in Indiana having a shot against Michigan until Michigan beat USC. It does seem like the change in quarterback going to Alex Orji is making a difference, right? Like, it's definitely made a difference. So I feel like Indiana will still have a shot against Michigan, but if Michigan continues to improve like they have showcased with the quarterback change in the USC game, then that still might be a little out of reach for Indiana, but it is possible. Keep Chopping says the casual fans are probably still skeptical. Absolutely. I mean, no matter how bad Indiana's been, there's always been some fans, judging by the fact that there are people there. Like, they've had some rough seasons. There's still people there. There are some diehards online and that go to the games, but it's not enough. Absolutely not enough. Jim R. said less than an hour away, so no more excuses. I'm going to the Nebraska game. I'll say if Indiana's undefeated in that Nebraska game, there is no reason why they're not sold out. That game better be sold out, and it better not be because there's a lot of Nebraska fans that traveled to Indiana and took the seats. Because I'm not going to lie, that actually was a big reason why the Indiana-Cincinnati game sold out. A lot of Cincinnati fans took the extra seats, and they were there. And when Cincinnati pulled away from Indiana, they made their presence felt. So that's a big issue too. Like Indiana needs to like legitimately sell out in the Nebraska game, and there shouldn't be a lot of Nebraska fans there. There's always going to be road, fans, but not that many is what needs to be the case. So absolutely. Vandy Dandy says Vanderbilt would beat the majority of the Big Ten right now. Absolutely. I don't know. Absolutely for you. I would say I almost said absolutely not, but hey, they would probably beat Northwestern. They'd beat Purdue. They beat some teams. They could probably beat a few. I don't know. That's interesting. I would have to sit on that. I have to think about that. It's like Rutgers. Rutgers is better this year. They're not bad. Illinois is proven to be better. Indiana's better. I don't know. USC would be hard. Probably impossible. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. A lot of tough teams. I don't know about that, right? Like, that's tough. But, again, for you, Vandy, I would say you never know. Maybe some of them. ZV Rusty says Indiana will always be a basketball school attendance-wise unless they host Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. I think we will have a better road game attendance, especially out west with the transplants. For sure. Yeah, with the out west games, they're going to have fans there, especially if they're good. And hopefully if Cignetti stays, it'll be good for years to come and continue to actually give people reason to watch. But, yeah, they're always going to be a basketball school. But the thing is I do believe that there is potential for some schools to become both. Look at even Alabama. I mean, I've been an Alabama football fan forever. Right? Like they have always been a football school. But Alabama basketball, I would tune into Alabama basketball and they wouldn't have any fans. They barely would have any fans, right? Now they do. Alabama basketball is good now. I mean, they're not elite, but they're good. And they're getting fans to show out. And actually the Alabama-Auburn game in basketball is well attended, both sides. Even Auburn has great fans for basketball, it seems now. So I think there is potential for some schools to do that. Michigan State has been really solid in football a lot of the time, and in basketball they're solid. So I think you can have crossover. It's just about if you're good. If Indiana football can become good and more on a regular basis, more so on a regular basis, I think they can get more fans. And I think that it can still be a basketball school, but you can kind of transfer some of that over to football. And kind of be like, hey, like Kentucky's a basketball school, but they've had success in football. They have fans there. Why can't Indiana do that? Absolutely. I mean, trust me. I've done content on my channel, right? On Only Talk Sports, which is also where you can find me, right? I've done basketball content on there. And Indiana basketball content does a whole lot better than football content. But I do think if Indiana football can do good and be relevant, I think they can get more fans, but we need to see it. So calling out Indiana fans, you got to show up to the Maryland game, make your presence felt, and quit being an embarrassment to college football. It's absolutely embarrassing. There are even articles written about this, that Indiana is winning and there's still no fans. Absolutely pathetic. We need to see more fans. Curt Cignetti wants to see more fans. And maybe if you show up to the games, support the team, Cignetti might stay longer. Maybe that will keep him from not going to the job if you show up. So that's a call to action for Indiana football fans. If you're out there, support this team. Kuz's Corner, appreciate you for stopping by. So just popping in to say Jeffrey does a great job. Please hit the like button. I appreciate that, Kuz's Corner. Absolutely. So glad to see you. And Wolverine Gate says Vandy Stadium's garbage. I will say that Indiana Stadium, now that they've renovated, they have renovated the stadium. It looks a lot nicer than it did back in like 2008, because I have like the 2008 college football video game or whatever, and Indiana Stadium in that game, which obviously it's an old game, but it looked rough. It was not enclosed. It just kind of looked more like a Northwestern. Now they've enclosed it. It looks a whole lot nicer. They've done a lot of renovations. So Indiana definitely upping their game with their stadium. Vanderbilt, their stadium is one of the worst in college football, especially for a major school. And I've heard a lot of people say that they do not enjoy going to Vanderbilt games. Like the seating is bad. They need to improve that. They need to do what Northwestern's doing. They need to fix that stadium. Absolutely. I thought I did see that, Vandy Dandy. They are renovating the stadium. Good move for Vanderbilt. That would help a lot, right? I think that would actually help with maybe, getting more fans to show up, especially if they have a decent team, which is rare, but it has happened. James Franklin did it. I mean, they've had some success in football. It's rare. But if you can get a better stadium, I think that would help a whole lot. Keep Chopping says, wasn't Vandy the team that hung a scoreboard from a crane? I remember that. I remember seeing that. Oh, my goodness. See, that's a bad look. Like, Indiana at least doesn't have that. Indiana Stadium's better. Oh, man, that's not a good look. But crowd size complaints, Cignetti calling for fans. They got to show up.